My fault? What do you mean, my fault? Did you see how I was driving up there? Look, if I didn't make a dive for the corner, he probably would have went for the inside and maybe potentially sort of done the same thing I did, so really, I'm the hero here. Disqualified? What? Come on, the car might still run. Whatever, I'm just gonna wait for the tow truck. Good evening, dear viewer. You join me on the Irahazaka slope after a mildly problematic attempt at racing. You know, this whole situation feels kind of familiar, though I can't quite figure out why. Anyway, I got the idea to do this from some game at my local arcade. I think it was called, I don't know, something with D in it. You know, it's based off a little show about racing. You probably haven't heard of it. Initial D Arcade Stage is a series of arcade games based off of the show Initial D. Wow, who would have guessed? And let me tell you, they are loads of fun to play, especially if you can find several in the same arcade and you can play it with a friend. Assuming you have any. But you see, I'm an American. And here, we never got any of the Initial D Arcade Stage games, officially anyway. I'm lucky enough to have one at an arcade near where I live, though others may not be as fortunate. Or maybe you just don't have time and or money to go to an arcade, in which case, what do you do then if you want to play something based off of Initial D? And that got me thinking, are there by chance any home console games based off of Initial D? And as it happens, yes. Quite a few, actually. Now, were any of these games officially released in the States? Pfft, no, what are you, stupid? We're Americans, we don't get anything cool. But that's not gonna stop me from... You are a pirate! I'd like you to guess what console you think the first Initial D game was on. PlayStation? Xbox? No. Nintendo Game Boy. Not just the first Initial D console game, the first Initial D game was on Nintendo Game Boy. And what's even more shocking than that is that this game came out while Initial D was still a comic book. So this actually predates the show. Oh man, this better be good. What do you want me to say about this? The Game Boy came out in 1989 and this game is from 1998. By then the Game Boy was already outdated, so were you really expecting something impressive here? I guess if I had to say one good thing about it, it's that the background is sort of detailed. I guess the best way to describe the graphics is if Initial D was made by Pixar. There's really not much to it. You kind of just drive. Though for original Game Boy, I suppose it is adequate. Speaking of Game Boy, this isn't the only one on it. Next up is Initial D for the Game Boy Advance. Its official name is Initial D Another Stage. Honestly, sounds like the developers just got sick of it and went, another one. Now, despite owning a Game Boy Advance, the game itself is more than I'm willing to pay for, so I guess it's back to plan B. Now, I expected this to be just like the last one, but with color. But I could not have possibly been more incorrect than that. You see, this is an RPG game, meaning we get dialogue choices, cutscenes, and a story. Not that I can understand any of it. And Google Translate is a bit... yeah. By far, though, the most interesting part of this game is the racing. You don't actually drive the car. Instead, it's basically an interactive cutscene. Whenever you come up to a corner, it slows down and you have to choose when to brake or how you approach the corner. Your choices affect what happens in the little cutscene playing above and affects the overall outcome of the race and all that. The choices you make will also affect your brake wear, your tire wear, and even your character's spirit. Yeah, that's right, your character can get demotivated and won't drive as well because his poor little feelings got hurt. As for the game's graphics, I'm sure most of you can already see it's a massive improvement. I no longer have to look at it for more than a second to tell immediately what car I'm looking at, and the animation for the racing cutscenes are actually pretty fun to watch. You know what, I actually think I like this game. It's a unique take on the racing genre, and it's impressive how much detail they fed onto the little Game Boy Advance screen. A screen, which might I add, is smaller than your hand. You know, unless you're a toddler. One of my favorite tiny details is how characters react to the car you pick at the start of the game. If you pick an Evo, they'll compare you to the Emperor group from second stage, and if you pick a Sil Lady, Ikutani will cry over Mako, because of course he will. I'm sure there's multiple things like this throughout the game, but I wasn't about to go spend 6 hours poorly translating the whole thing with Google, so let's just move on. Finally moving on from the Game Boy, we have Initial D on the PlayStation, and this one is in full 3D. They even tried to recreate moments from the show with these 3D cuts. Oh, what is wrong with you? Okay, so this game is rough, to say the least. Unlike the last two games, you play as Takumi going through the events of Initial D Stage 1, which means the only car you get to drive is the 8.6, and pretty much the only mountain you get to race on is Mount Akina. And as for the graphics, it's original PlayStation, so it's really not bad for the time, unless you get the 3D cutscenes. As for the gameplay, however, cars handle like original Gran Turismo on crack. Cars are able to speed up while they're drifting, which makes absolutely no sense. Scaling for the 3D models is way off because these crowds of people make the 8.6 look like a giant. And as for the music, well, the only thing I can really tell you is that there's no Eurobeat, but I couldn't tell you what there is because the sound design is like... And it's not important, but I feel like it's worth mentioning that this game has the creepiest boot screen I've ever seen. Damn. Look, all I'm saying is that there's a reason people use that same text-to-speech voice 20 years later to make analog horror, alright? So, overall, we have a mess of cars that don't drive properly, sound that'll make your ears bleed, and characters that'll give me nightmares for the next few days. I'm not even kidding when I say I found the Game Boy Advance game far more enjoyable than this. Now, earlier at the beginning of the video, I did say that none of these games got officially released in the States. However, that's only partially correct. You see, there was one Initial D game that got released in America for Windows XP, and trust me, there's a good reason you probably haven't heard of it. It's called Initial D Mountain Vengeance, and it's based off of the Tokyo Pop dub of Initial D, which means there's no Eurobeat and character names are all messed up. Let's take a look, shall we? I didn't edit this, this is just what the game looks like when you open it. Perhaps this was a sign from God not to go any further, but I was feeling bold today. Now all this vomit in the background is actually supposed to look like this, but I guess something went horribly wrong in my attempt to play an obscure 20-year-old game on Windows 11. Now here in the menu we can play the game, do a quick race, mess with settings, play an intro, or learn about Initial D. Yup, cause I can read all that. And yes, this is the only song that plays throughout the entire game. Initial Drive! And speaking of the game, I'm gonna let it do its own talking.
Start the countdown. 3, 2, 1, go!
A few moments later.
Initial dream. Initial dream.
You see, what happened here was I tried to steer my car just a little bit to the left, which sent it straight into the nearest tree at Mach 1. Shortly after, I then accidentally steered left into a wall of tree.jpg and was stuck there because there's no reverse button, and your car is stuck accelerating no matter what you do. All to the soundtrack of... I really have nothing to say about Mountain Vengeance. It has nothing unique or interesting going for it at all. The cars feel awful to drive, the soundtrack is... and it's barely capable of functioning as a game. Not to mention the game's graphics are awful, and don't try telling me that's just because the game is old, because look at Gran Turismo 4, which came out in the same year. The best way I can describe it is it feels like one of those cheap movie tie-in games that you'd see on like the Xbox 360. You know, the kind that only existed for the sake of sitting on a Walmart shelf waiting for some toddler to bug their mom for it. And now you're probably thinking, man, this is pointless. Clearly the only good Initial D games are for the arcade. But hope does lie in the PS2. Ladies and gentlemen, Initial D's special stage for the PlayStation 2 isn't awful. We did it. We found a good one, everybody. Celebrate. Okay. We have multiple game modes, multiple drivable cars, driving physics that don't feel terrible. But most important of all, we have Eurobeat. Special Stage is about as close to a straight port of the arcade games as we can get. The game has two primary modes, one where you play as Takumi going through the events of the show, and one where you basically play as yourself racing all the characters. Looking at the story mode first, it covers stages 1 through 3, and it's honestly pretty good. We get these cool little cutscenes of the comic books with Ikatani as the narrator before each race, and some 2D animated-ish ones. Each race plays out pretty accurate to the show, and you can even hear some of the characters saying lines that I'm pretty sure change depending on how you drive. Not that I can understand a single word of it, that is. I'm also pretty sure they got all the original voice actors back rather than just ripping dialogue from the show, since all of it sounds slightly different. As far as driving goes, it's not realistic at all, though that doesn't mean it's not fun. Cars will start sliding if you so much as breathe on the joystick, though it still requires some amount of skill to keep them in control. One of the coolest things in the game is being able to pull off tricks from the show, such as the gutter run or the Irohazaka jump. No, they don't necessarily make you any faster, but come on, are you really gonna pass up the chance to perfectly recreate a scene from Initial D, even if you have no chance of actually doing it correctly? Now, in the game's other mode, you get to play as your own character and with a car of your choosing. The car selection is alright, but mostly limited to just what was in Initial D. Now, you can modify the car you pick like most other racing games, but it works in a weird way. The game lets you choose what your car will look like when it's fully spec'd out, and then as you win races, your car will slowly gain those upgrades one at a time. Personally, I prefer picking each individual upgrade myself like in Need for Speed, but it's honestly a small complaint. You progress by beating all the characters in the show, starting with Itsuki and his 8-5, and eventually having to face characters like Takumi and Ryosuke. Some interesting things happen along the way, like Shingo making you do that weird duct tape thing so your steering's messed up, but most races are all the same, just getting harder as you go on. I honestly think it's a really fun idea to sort of be your own character and race in your own car. So far, the only other game on this list to do that was Another Stage back on the Game Boy, and it's honestly done really well here. Overall, Special Stage is the best on this list by far. The only small issue is that, like the other games, it's all in Japanese. Though I say small issue since if you just learn what most of the menu buttons do, you're basically good to go.
Honorable mention.
I will not be including that one Initial D typing game on this list because that's just stupid and I can't find it anywhere. On another note, apparently there was an Initial D game for 3DS, though I can only find one gameplay video of it since apparently it's like lost media now. It looks like one of those drag racing games you can get on your phone or whatever, so not really worth a look at. Now, moving on, we have Initial D Street Stage on the PlayStation Portable. It's just a port of Special Stage, but without the mode where you play as Takumi. That's basically it. You can do the blind attack, so that's kind of cool, I guess. Oddly enough, cars seem to handle more realistically in this version, which, as you can tell by my awful driving, makes it a lot harder. Other than that, I haven't found any really big differences between this and Special Stage, other than that it's portable, of course, so we're just gonna move on. And now it's time for the final game on this list, Initial D Extreme Stage on the PlayStation 3. And this one sure looks promising. Extreme Stage is the newest game on this list with the best graphics, the most roads to race on, and another all Eurobeat soundtrack. Without a doubt, this is the best Initial D game for console. Is what I would be telling you if it actually was better than Special Stage. Look, yeah, this game looks great at first glance, but overall it just has less content than Special Stage, and one other big issue I'll get into in just a minute. The game only has one primary mode, which is just recycled from Special Stage, that being the mode where you play as your own character in your own car. You race all the characters from the show to progress, earn upgrades along the way, blah blah blah, you get the drill. Now it's not that there's anything wrong with this, it was great in Special special stage, it's just that extreme stage doesn't really seem to add anything on top of it. If anything, it actually feels like we get less here than what we did in special stage. To start with, there isn't a single new car in this game, so if you were hoping for maybe some stuff from 5th stage, well, sorry to disappoint. Though it's honestly a small issue compared to the actual driving. Cars handle awful in this game. Once again, we have that weird thing where cars will speed up while going full sideways. I swear sometimes they even accelerate while facing nearly full backwards. Every car feels like it's on rails, even more so than in special stage, which means there's basically no skill involved at all. You can just floor it the entire way through a race and turn like it's nothing. Speaking of turning, the dead zone for steering with a joystick is huge. Buddy, either you're turning full force or you're not gonna turn. So yeah, awful driving in a game about driving. That kinda ruins the whole thing for me. Another small thing that just bugs me was the removal of the drawn cutscenes in favor of 3D models, which look... You know what? Nope, still better than the PS1 game. Alright, this video's already taken about 4 months to make just because I'm lazy, so that's all the initial D games for console. Overall, Special Stage is the one I recommend to play the most. It's got hours of content and a bunch of cool little bonus stuff that's also fun. And guys, I swear I'm gonna get my upload schedule in check. I know it's, let us say, ungood. And someday I'm planning on doing a full review of just Initial D, so stick around for that. And also, I promise I'll stop stealing FNAF fan game characters and make my own drawn character one day for these videos. But then again, I doubt most of you watching even know what this is, so it doesn't really matter right now. Anyway, stick around for more videos in this kind of style, hopefully soon. And goodbye. Go on, get out of here. Go. I said get out!